All right, thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to the Coastal Flood Policy Roundtable. I think many of you have been with us the last day and a half for the Gilbert White Flood Policy Forum, and this is a special segment of this of the forum where we have a wonderful invited speaker, as well as going to be talking with some of the forum recommendations, and then ending with a roundtable discussion. And so, what I'd like to do first is just give a short presentation in terms of the roundtable itself. And I would like to start off by acknowledging our sponsors. Again, I think as was pointed out yesterday, our sponsor, this entire event is a sponsored event, and it's one that the organizations listed here really stepped up to the plate to help further, I think, the flood policy discussions we have in the nation. So could we have a round of applause for our sponsors, please? Okay, so a little bit about the Association of State Floodplain Managers and the Association Foundation. The ASFPM mission is really a two-part mission. I love talking to our members about this because as an organization, we are a mission-driven organization. We're there to reduce the misery, the suffering, and the losses due to flooding, but then also protecting the natural and beneficial functions of floodplains. Some folks may call us kind of the non-structural flood people because when you look at the overall mission, we tend to gravitate towards those kinds of solutions. But at the same time, our 15,000 members know that we have to use every tool in the toolbox to address flood issues. So we do have 15,000 members, including 34 state chapters. Hopefully we'll be up to 35 in the next month or so. And as an organization, we have a sister organization, if you will, the ASFPM Foundation. It's a separate 501c3 organization. And the ASFPM Foundation, which again is the host of the overall Gilbert White Flood Forum, is really an incubator of strategic and research initiatives that promote the mission of the association and promote the flood loss reduction mission. And so what has the ASFPM Foundation contributed in the last several years since it was incepted in 1996? Well, again, these forums, we've had I believe this is our fourth forum. The foundation also has established a Nick Winter Memorial Scholarship Fund. It was one of the leading resource providers when we were starting the No Adverse Impact Initiative. And I just saw in an email today that we have researchers across the country wondering, how, for example, how many states have adopted NAI type approaches or how many communities. So it's something that has become integrated in our national way we deal with flood management, and NAI continues to grow and work on reducing flood losses. Some new things, such as our Flood Manager interactive game. And this is something I think Dale Lehman showed a little bit in some of his slides yesterday, and then also leading some of the research and the publications. Now, the Gilbert White Flood Policy Forum, again, many of you have been participating in the forum, but it is a gathering of invited experts across the country. And every couple years, these experts are here to debate and discuss and provide recommendations on a specific topic. So this year's topic is coastal flood risk, but we've had past policy forums that have looked at floodplain management in 2050, have analyzed the 1% chance flood standard, looked at flood risk management, and so forth. One of the things that, even as a practitioner in the floodplain management community, I remember one of our past forums where we had an invited demographer talking, and I think it was the Floodplain Management 2050. He was talking about the average lifespan of a home. I mean, we have useful life or benefit cost analysis and those things, but what he was talking about is the realistic lifespan of a home being over 150 years in duration. And when you think of it from a floodplain management standpoint, what does that mean? Are our systems even equipped to deal with something that's going to be around for 150 years? The risk, the potential losses, and all of those aspects of it. So the forum, I think, greatly contributes to the knowledge base and the discussion and the direction of floodplain management policy. So to get started, I want to be a little bit provocative, and a lot of these kinds of things are things that that there could be some debate and discussion around. But let's look at policies that contribute in some way to flood risk, and look at it from a federal, state, and community and public standpoint. So at the federal level, things like the National Flood Insurance Program, the 100-year standard. We know through the comprehensive evaluation of the NFIP that was done by the American Institutes of Research that the NFIP contributes somehow to flood risk. There's been lots of studies done, and they've concluded different things. And I think the conclusion of the overall study of the program is that, yeah, it does something. We just don't know exactly what and how much. But the emphasis on just structural approaches. And again, this is more of that long-term standpoint where for over a century, the structural approach was the main approach of how we dealt with flood risk. And really, non-structural approaches to flood risk did not even come into being until the middle of the 1900s. And then, of course, with the creation of the National Flood Insurance Program and things, you had some of these other tools. Disaster relief. Yesterday, Larry called it the big elephant in the room. A former FEMA mitigation administrator I had seen speaking earlier this year basically said this is the issue in terms of policies contributing to risk. We are a very generous nation. We're a generous society. We're a generous government. But that very generosity is perhaps leading to policies and contributing and increasing our overall flood risk. And then the lack of attention to climate adaptation. The climate is changing, our sea levels are rising, and this is, I think this is an area that's really evolving. As the data becomes more and more of a mountain, it's hard to ignore climate change and the ways we adapt to it. So from a state and community standpoint, what are some of the things that contribute to risk? Because remember, ASFPM's concept of flood risk management is a shared concept. It is federal, state, local, and individual. And we need to be mindful of that, I think, when we're looking at this overall broad context. So, at the state and the community level, usually the things that contribute to risk are controlling those for the short-term benefits, and whether it's a short-term economic gain, jobs gain, and those kinds of things, and maybe ignoring the longer-term trends, the research trends that, for instance, show that 40% of businesses, small businesses, never reopen after a large flood disaster. Perceiving flooding to be a federal program. And again, I go back to the generosity. Our generosity has been so excessive that the risk and the perception of risk is externalized now to the federal government in being a federal program. And the public. We have, and this has been a well-researched phenomena in disasters, is that kind of the risk, being unaware of risk, or more importantly, the unwillingness to accept the risk that a person is at. The knowledge of residual risk. And I think we all probably share a little bit of that, because don't we have a lot of policies, a lot of maps and things? They show flood zones, they show hazard zones, but they don't really show residual risk zones, because we kind of want to pretend that they don't exist. But we know indeed that they do. And then very misplaced concerns about flood insurance. The concept of flood insurance, for some reason, flood insurance has not attained a status like maybe we have with life insurance or homeowners insurance or those kinds of things. It's seen as a burden or as a penalty, as opposed to protecting a person's investment and in their well-being. So there have been several reports since the 1970s that have talked about making recommendations in terms of this arena of flood risk. And I hope that this afternoon's presentations will continue that dialogue but we do have some of these recommendations, whether it's the 1% or the 100-year standard, that there is, and I love saying this in all the presentations I go to, for any complex flood problem that a community experiences, you will never find a one-way solution on dealing with that flood risk. We have to have different tools in the toolbox, and we have to apply multiple tools to deal with those solutions, or with those flood problems. And additionally, there's a time element to this as well. And communities have developed over hundreds of years. We can't solve the flood problems in necessarily a 5-year time frame or a 10-year time frame. So we've got to be integrated, and we've got to be thinking long term. There exist within federal programs barriers to considering some of the non-structural approaches, and there's some incentives and disincentives that aren't quite aligned. Climate change. And I think this is really going to be the issue of the next several generations, probably, in terms of especially how it's going to affect our coastal environments. And even though as ASFPM, we talk about a shared responsibility approach, there definitely are good and wise roles that the federal government can and should play. Providing standards, funding, and technical assistance in promoting a mitigation, a resiliency, a sustainability approach. So some of the federal initiatives that we have that I'm excited to hear Chair Sutley's presentation. The Federal Interagency Floodplain Management Task Force under the current administration has been reinvigorated. It's something that had existed previously and became defunct for a while, and is now actually something that is meeting and working on lots of different things, principles and guidelines, and of course the discussion and the update of P&G, older existing executive orders, EO 11988 and EO 11990 on floodplain management and wetlands, climate change. With the President's, executive order on sustainability and dealing with things like mitigation and adaptation, and also acknowledging that it's not just a one agency issue. It's not just FEMA, it's HUD, and it's lots of different agencies being involved in that. Reform the NFIP, of course, we're in the very beginning stages of implementing a large reform bill that has going to have some very interesting consequences and probably some unintended consequences. And then finally, the federal sustainability initiatives that, again, the current administration has done a very good job of promoting. So with that, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker, and that is Nancy Sutley, and she is the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. In her role as chair, she serves as the principal environmental policy advisor to the president. Prior to her appointment, Chair Sutley was the Deputy Mayor of Energy Environment for the City of Los Angeles, California. She represented Los Angeles on the Board of Directors for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and served on the California State Water Resources Control Board from 2003 to 2005. She advised on water and air pollution policy and established a budget and legislative priorities during the administration of Bill Clinton. Chair Sutley worked for the EPA as Senior Policy Advisor to the Regional Administrator in San Francisco and Special Assistant to the Administrator in Washington, D.C. Chair Sutley received her bachelor's degree from Cornell University and her master's in public policy from Harvard University. Please extend a warm welcome to Chair Sutley.